council. Then of the media. Everybody, making this being recorded, the live stream, and it will be available on the YouTube channel. And the emergency exits for this room, the door that we probably came in, and the door behind me, the need to evacuate, use one of those exits, assemble outside the playground, and please remain there until you are asked. And we will start our meeting here. Kia ora te marino, kia whakatata, ana, hei huarahi, te rangi nei, aroa, aroa, now we have apologies from Councillor Morley. It's possible that we may have an apology from and we have Councillor Woodcock joining us online. I move that the apologies be accepted. Do I have a second? Councillor Riley, thank you very much. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest, please? Being none, we'll move straight on. I have two acknowledgements I wish to make. Does anybody want to say any? They will come to you in a moment. So the first of my acknowledgements is to our interim CE, Paul Gardner. You became CE under very sudden circumstances, a very difficult time in our calendar of events, and you've picked up those responsibilities with one, and I thank you for that. In fact, I think you've been absolutely been very lucky that you agreed to come out into a CE. And I know that your BLT colleagues have been very supportive, and I'd like to please pass on my thanks to them for that support that they have given. And whilst I suspect most of us here are aware of the contributions of the ELP team, the work that we've been doing recently, probably some of us are not quite so aware of people who helped you out like that, filling, doing other things as you normally have done. And I'm thinking of people like Nigel, possibly Danny, etc. And others who I probably do not even know. So if you could pass on to there and look out these things for those that we do much appreciate. And my second acknowledgement, in fact, is to the minor council, because here we are, we've come to the end of our first financial year, and it's not been an easy 9 months. There's been a number of difficulties we've had to work through, and if I just sort of pick out some of the things that appear to me, other people don't see it quite so much, but I particularly like to thank Kay, Melissa and Alison, because much of what they do is just not seen by anybody or hardly anybody at all. But the district plan, my district plan, which takes up a lot of our society's potentially most critical single document that we will make in our time here. So it's incredibly important. And then, in addition to that, I'd like to thank Colin and Aidan, because they picked up the responsibilities of chairing our committees along with Kay and Melissa. And what that's involved is a huge amount of very, very detailed sort of decisions to teach small things in order to get on top of the situation we find ourselves in. And the people in some respects that I'm in awe of the most are the ones I have mentioned here. So councillors Maynard and Bolton, who on top of everything they do for the council, running very substantial businesses, and just like our government stand off, as I say, I would be. Yes, and I thank you all, and I thank you for this. So those are my two acknowledgements. Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor Martin. I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Ian Campbell, a long-term Martinborough resident, long-term Martinborough. Passed away last week. His funeral is occurring today in town. His sons and daughter have all stayed around Martinborough, established families, and farming and working and contributing to our community as he in his
I think we'll move on to public participation. And on my agenda, Mr. Headley, you are first. Last.
When voted in, councillors are meant to represent all. Instead, councillors have done everything to keep urban rates low at the expense of rural. This is the worst technique I have seen council use to achieve this. Do councillors understand the unforeseen consequences of their decision? Animal control. There are two sections to this function, and they are funded by the general rate and fees. There is a dog control, which is more urban than rural, and animal control, which is more rural than urban. Dog control has mostly been funded by dog fees, whereas there is no fee for animal control, so it's funded by rural by the general rate. The situation has changed with the building of the dog pound. The dog fees no longer cover the dog control activity. In the proposed annual plan, we have seen an increase in this function of 275,681, which has been strongly allocated to animal control, which is to do with wandering stock on roads, instead of dog control. There is no justification for putting 275,680 onto animal control, which is 100% funded by rural. Instead, it should be put into dog control funded by urban. Council can lift urban dog fees or rate urban for most of the 275,681, which is mostly to do with dog control, which is more to do with urban than rural. Animal control has nothing to do with dog control. Footpaths. Now, without any consultation, council now say that urban pay for footpaths out of the 30% they pay of the land transport. Money-wise, this is no different to funding of the past, which was 30% urban, 70% rural of the land transport. All it is a change of language, nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Now council seizes upon this opportunity and proposes that they will pause new footpaths with a saving of 205,000, and this will be used to lower urban rates by that amount. Instead, that money being used for other roading projects. Rural still have to pay 70% of urban roads, streets, lighting, street cleaning, etc. Should that be reduced to 30%? If it's to be taken off rates, it should be taken off 30% urban, 70% rural, as that's the amount each would pay of the Land Transport Act before the change of language. If it was a separate function, you can do what you like with the money. I'll go back to governance. This government is paid 52% by a UAGC, 48% by the general rate on the land value. The land value split is 30% urban, 70% rural. So the 48% at present should be funded the same, 30% urban, 70% rural. However, under the proposal, it will see 25% urban, 75% rural. What more does rural get that they have to pay more than their land value split? At the start of the previous council, it was to be 40% urban, 60% rural. The mayor states in the message from the mayor, we will also be honest with you about the reason why we need you to consider seriously the proposal in this document. I say to the mayor and council, consider seriously and fix the problem I have highlighted in council's proposal now, not leave it for another year and stop doing everything to keep urban rates low at the expense of rural. Otherwise, all the words in the mayor's message are meaningless. The mayor and all the councils have a fiduciary duty of care to rural ratepayers. Some farmers are facing increases of $10,000 on top of the tens of thousands they already paid. Council should not vote in a flawed annual plan. Summary. The dog and animal control.
Excuse me, Jim. That's your 5 minutes. Now, I'll allow one question. No, that's your 5 minutes.
No,
I will allow one question. from
there,
council.
there are documents at the
Excuse
back
me.
that
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Your 5 minutes is up. Can you sit back, please, and let our next public forum come forward, please?
There are documents in the back to explain my position on the animal control. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Warren, you're next, and I gather you've got some. Thank you.
Mike and Terry, Mike Gray and Terry Cameron. We're actually the remnants of the Waikato Boys group. And we've promoted quality community governance.
And we've all had, I think, but
So there's 3 documents.
Yeah.
One is the template of the charter. The second is the summary of that charter, which probably makes for a little bit easier reading, and presentation from that. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councillors and ladies and gentlemen. I'm presenting today, bringing your attention to the benefits of establishing a charter between the South Wairarapa District Council and the Greytown Community Board. As a ratepayer and a representative on the Greytown Community Board, I strongly believe that a formal charter between both bodies will foster a more effective and collaborative relationship, benefiting both parties and the Greytown community at large. In my opinion, the change was brought about by Order in 1989, whereby local body, borough and county council were amalgamated into district councils, had not brought about efficiencies and cost savings that he said would occur. Our rates go up at an alarming rate year and we see less value for compulsory investment for the ratepayer. A charter serves the foundational document borrowed from the Local Government New Zealand website, Community Board Charter Template. It outlines the roles, responsibilities and power of the Community Board. It really states the board as a legitimate entity under the Local Government Act 2002, Section 52, and provides a framework validating the Community Board's authority to represent the interests and concerns of our community. This enhances the Greytown Community Board credibility and strengthens the trust between the board and the residents we serve. It will also encourage more ratepayers to stand at election time for the Greytown Community Board, knowing their voices matter, which brings about quality community governance. Charter grants the Community Board specific powers and authority, enabling us to make informed decisions on matters relevant to the community's welfare. It also outlines the structure and governance of the Community Board, establishing protocols for decision making, meeting procedures and reporting requirements, ensuring transparency and accountability. Greytown is unique and has a number of important organisations within the ward. For example, Greytown Trustman's Trust, Papawai Marae, Greytown Historical Society, South Wairarapa Working Club, Greytown Sports and Leisure, Greytown's Men's Shed, Greytown Little Theatre,
Okay, thank you very much. Now, is there anything that either of your companions would like to add?
I think they're here to answer the questions.
Well, we'll leave it in there as well. Come over.
Thank you, Warren. My question is whether or not you have the support of the Greyhound Community Board or any of the other community groups that you mentioned for moving forward with the Greyhound Community Board.
No, I haven't. I'm bringing this as I said, I'm in the community board, but this is a private ratepayer resident, and my aim is to, or our group's aim, is to promote this within our community. Whether the other communities want to pick it up under that side.
Which group are you?
The citizens promoting quality governance. And hopefully we'll get support from the community. I mean, it's no good community board running something the community doesn't want. So the idea is to see if the community want this, and if they do, then I hope that the community board will pick it up. Greyhound will pick it up. With other community boards want to go along this line as well. I mean, this is subject. So there's a representative of them.
Well, in a private capacity, of course, I'm a resident of Featherston, and I've been working with the scheme for some time now. And I do believe there is good scope for future cooperation. My background has been in local government at the national level. And I think there's an important phase coming for local government in New Zealand. We should be up and running with it.
Thank you. Just move down here, Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Warren, and thanks very much for sending this through prior to today, because it gave us the opportunity to have a read through what you proposed. And my question is based very much along the same lines as the deputy mayor, is that this is probably something that probably needs to go to the Great Community Board, get it enforced, and then that would probably carry that additional weight back on the council table.
And that's what I was saying, it's no point just, taking the community board, I think it's community matter with the community.
Yep.
Get behind it, and if they do, then I think the community should look at it.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Rick.
Councillor Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, right, councillor Higgins.
Right, okay, thanks, Mayor Martin. Warren, reading through all that information, that's great, thanks. I see that local government New Zealand have got that template for the community board charter. You're aware of what other community boards or what other councils around New Zealand have charters for the community boards?
I don't think there's any,
Right,
that I know of.
okay.
The only thing I haven't actually really been the Swanaka council on breakaway in Wills County district.
All right.
And I haven't actually got a page.
Right, so yeah, that was just going to be interested to see how that chart was working around the country and how you have envisaged it.
I didn't even.
Okay.
So Stevie.
Thanks for your submission, Warren, and colleagues from Great Yarn. I'm aware of a lot of the principles of the charter, which are very sound. I appreciate that. Much of what is outlined is already outlined in standing orders of how the community boards and council are to engage with one another, including some of the references that you've made to ethical conduct and the relationship side of things. So it would be a really good idea to take it back to community board and to look for that alignment, because the standing orders are things that are commonplace across our community boards as well to ensure consistency.
My main concern is that there's never been a sharing of resources, or what our ability, as I say there, to access resources, make comments or suggestions on how our roads are spent. I've been previous councils and know that we don't know how our roads are spent, how they're allocated in this. And I think you can have all the ethical standards and everything like that, but it gets down to the point where we need to know where our roads are going, how they've been spent. We don't see it around the roads.
Thank you very much. Okay, but you're always welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and I think we could all share the view that anything that can be done to improve the effectiveness for our community board, improve the effectiveness of our local. Thank you. Are there any action on other
Jim's this presentation and what we did is proposed really keep in mind during our rating review process. I think it's decisions that make certainly something we should catch up for the rating review process. Thank you.
Okay, so we come to A7 on the agenda, which is anybody that needs from the business damage to have the agenda. We come to A8, which is to do with business arising from our standing board. But I just pass the comment all of my neighbour that there's something a little unsatisfactory, I think, about this standing item, and that I don't actually recall a time when we've had a chairperson of the board and actually talk to me before, and I just wonder, are they getting the invitations?
I believe they are. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Look at also.
Yeah. And it may be what I would say is what I expect. This is not particularly convenient time, and maybe we could explore better different ways to help the council address the issues that the board standing rise. So we'll go to item A9, which is minutes of confirmation, and there are 3 sets of minutes. 7th of June, 8th of June, and the 9th of June. Has anybody spotted a correction, please? Yes, Councillor. We spelled your name. No.
His name is mine. There's just a part, I can't remember which one of these it's in. But when we were debating the 4 things that we had consulted on before the end of the term. In that, for the community grants, it's got me recorded as 4, but I was against the reduced community grants. And
Same side.
Even further. The thing, do I have a mover that can speak, Councillor? Councillor Saville. All those in favour of confirming the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. That's carried. Are there any matters arising? We've been done. So we will now move to section B of the agenda, which is the second report from the Chief Executive and from Council officers. Paul, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, we're in place now with the 23-24 financial year annual plan and the setting of rates. There are 2 components to this. The annual plan is setting of rates to assess this part of the process. The council officers and members have been working together thoroughly in this process, and if I piece of all, I'd like to firstly thank the executive team for incredible contribution throughout the process. I'm going to invite CFO and Bradley to actually talk to the annual plan, or to be adopted, and what the setting of rates means for us. So any let's
morning. The covering report, obviously we've had lots of conversations, there's been workshops, the consultation process, the hearings and the deliberations that have led us to this point. The full consultation, the questions obviously went out, and we made decisions during the deliberations around giving guidance to us to prepare this final document. There have been some tweaking, as you're aware, of the final outcome of the financials that I might not comment on. And I guess the decision now rests with you guys to approve the final budget for the next 12 months. That's sort of 200 really. The proposed rates increase to 90 wage. We have discussed how we got to that point, and some decisions that we made on deliberations and the review of inflation as the actual program groups, and therefore the reduction in some appreciation and other business. So I think we have detailed that information, and it's outlined in the budgets, and then and all the financial statements with the due information is covered in the plan.
So we'll now invite questions from councillors and first your question should be to help you decide which way you go, which is either yes, no, maybe person, does anybody-
Didn't comment. If I know how to do it. Yeah, I'm quite happy to wait. Okay, so firstly, thanks to Karen and Amanda for the work that you've done around this. And I'd certainly like to thank all the budget holders within council for looking very closely at their budgets and doing that line by line overview of where we spend money. And one of the things I find over the years is that I've been through a number of annual plan hearings. This has been particularly difficult because of the cost drivers where we found ourselves in this situation. It's not always acceptable, I guess, at the end of the day, but I know hand on heart that our officers have done really good work in this and arrived at a place that perhaps we can live with. And we'll see.
Right. The way I look at it is that there's no need to vote on each of the 7 recommendations separately. They all are a job line. Does anybody have a disagree with that? Okay, in that case, I invite somebody to move that we accept the recommendations. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Second, Councillor Senator Potter. Was there anything you would like to add as part of your?
No, I'd like to see that.
Yes, I would like to acknowledge that this annual plan, I think shows that this council is listening. We've undertaken community consultation that has included drop institutions, community meetings, submissions, hearings. And I would like to think that the decisions made around this council table have valued the feedback that we received during that time. And I hope that that process gives confidence to our community that regardless of the time when they come into those submissions and hearing and getting back to us, that we can continue to listen to the feedback. I would also echo Councillor Oldsworth's thank finance team and our wider staff team who have responded to this council's request to keep looking for savings where they could be made, and that has resulted in the final number today that is less than that could have been several weeks ago. So thank you, that was appreciated.
Right. That's what I see. Oh,
No, I was, particularly, I need to go.
That's
Thanks, Mayor Martin. I'd also like to certainly acknowledge my appreciation of the work that the staff, Karen and Amanda and her teams here across the board and Paul have done to get a lot of our new councillors up to speed on the scene process. It's been rather daunting. I know I've asked a lot of questions to get up to speed. But I will say that and this is my personal feeling, and this is and where I'm going to go is that I'm going to vote against adopting the plan today. I'm unhappy that we haven't been able to reduce the rates that we charge against rural ratepayers further. I believe that we've had a real opportunity to reduce the rates for both rural and urban by approximately that 8.5% if we use that better funding to reduce our rates. We have heard what our ratepayers have said, and while 70% of them have said that they wanted to reduce spending on water infrastructure, and we've done it. And we agreed to do that, increase, my mistake, increase spending on water infrastructure. However, 60% of our submissions also wanted to increase spending on rural roading reserve, yet chose not to do that. In this annual plan, we have not signalled anywhere to our rural ratepayers that they will be getting any increases of service, i.e. more cleaning of the water tables and culverts. This is but one example of the many issues that we've heard loud and clear from our ratepayers. There's nothing in this annual plan which shows that our rural ratepayers what they will get for the increased rates of over 460,000 that will be charged for roading in the following year. If there was an opportunity to vote separately for urban and rural rates, I'll probably vote positively for the urban rates that we've set and vote no for the rural, but as that is not possible, I'm going to vote against the adoption of the MPP today. Now, as councillors, we've all talked around the table. We've talked about intergenerational projects, but roading and infrastructure are also intergenerational as well. We have to take a long-term view to roading and infrastructure, otherwise our communities thrive, as we now see here at Marlborough. And there is no point talking about the next community facility or the next community project if there are no more people coming into the community, because we can't scale up our infrastructure for our growth going forward.
I'd just like to, I'd like to support what Aidan said. I've supported what he said throughout this whole thing. We've listened to our rural ratepayers, who, for the Marlborough Ward, we have a lot. We have genuine concerns with regards to that, and of course we have concerns with regards to the to the Marlborough wastewater treatment plant and Greytown being unsuccessful and asking for the better off funding to be used on those projects, and so urban ratepayers have increased because they showed that they wanted. You know, they want to be able to flush the toilet and have what's there go down. Sorry to be so blunt, but the reality is, you know, we talk about the next, exactly, the next lot of people that will be coming through. But our job is to make it a place that is safe for them. And we know that it's, if you don't have good wastewater infrastructure, there's no one's going to go, oh yes, that looks like a fantastic place to live. We can't flush a toilet, but we can, you know, let's go and live there. So we're missing out on an opportunity. And one that I also feel very, very strongly about, because that's meant that the rates have increased for urban, and by not doing the rural roading as they asked, we've been able to decrease the rural rates. But to what effect? I have some genuine concerns with regards to those two things as well.
Councillor Woodcock, can you hear us?
Very sporadically. The sound quality is actually terrible, but I'm getting the gist of it. Can you hear me?
Yes, brilliant.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everyone. I have a few notes I've jotted down here, going over things in the middle of the night. I too, like Aidan, will be voting against it. I'm sorry, I'm not happy where we've got to for our ratepayers. In general, I've had many ratepayers tell me that they can't pay these rates, and they won't be, because they just can't afford it. There are a few little bits and pieces in there I'd like some questions on, but I'm not going to go too much into it. There was on page 80 on the, what's 80 on my screen, it's got rural roading reserve with a closing balance of 1.5 million. I thought we were told that was empty.
Sorry.
Yes.
Not in front of that, Brisbane. Woody, that is the current balance, but the funds are being committed, it's not spent.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that, Karen. Yeah,
Or, so, can we get you nearer the mic?
Sorry, can you hear me, Woody?
oh, yeah, roughly, yeah, yep. Yeah,
Right, you could,
yeah, it's, so I was looking at the balance sheet and that, and looking at the total rising costs have risen 6.487 million above the forecast in 3 years. So that's above what was forecast, not was actually happening 3 years ago. So that's a 22.67% rise. I know costs have gone up dramatically with certain things, but I'm like Aidan, I think we can do better. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Councillor.
I'll just think this is turned into a process of putting everything on the table. I would like to say that I will happily be voting for this annual plan. I am aware that there's areas in the annual plan that possibly given more time, we could have come to different decisions around. However, we have been time constrained and we have had extraordinary pressures on this budget and extraordinary pressures on the process of getting to the budget. I think that there's been some pretty big compromises made amongst councillors around the table to try to make use of additional funding that we possibly could, whilst also protecting that as an asset, a financial asset going forward. So specifically the Better Off Fund. I think that as we move into a rating review process, there will be opportunities to adjust how we do this. But from my understanding, certainly from the information that we've been given from officers, I think that this plan will allow us to achieve the work that we need to achieve over the next year, whilst keeping costs as low as we feasibly can keep them. So I'm happy with the process, I'm happy with the support and information that we've got, and I'm happy to vote for this thing.
Councillor Ross, do you wish to decide the vote? No, it's been very late.
So we'll come to the 7 recommendations what we pulled together. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
All right.
Those 3 against.
I'm sorry, even if it's just the name on there, you know, like that shows that it's there.
He's not using his video.
Oh, it's not using it, yeah.
Jason does present us with options because I think the rule more or less say that we have to know that the person who's at the meeting is at the meeting.
Yeah, we know he's there, it's his councillor Aaron Woodcock.
He might have gone away.
There he is.
Can you see me? I don't know if it's working.
Thank you.
I'm still in my old work clothes, so I'm keeping the video off.
Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is freedom and sorry, I was sitting. It was Gary. Yes, it was. Yeah. Thank you. Well, Charlie, thank you for your.
Yeah.
Registered on. Right. So on the agenda, there was an item to do with the fire economic development strategy work program, but that's been taken off the agenda. For various reasons, which brings us therefore with the freedom camping bylaw. We've only been here for 5 minutes.
Yes.
I think we could. Oh, do freedom. Right, so who wants to?
Sorry, guys.
I actually have a question.
Man with big foot.
Right, we're a board that is really good. That's what these guys think, so. Yeah.
Are they working?
Now to invite Bradley to carry on, but just in case anybody without willingness to otherwise, just look without technology. Anyway, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to invite Emma from GHD Consulting to talk to this paper. She prepared it with her colleague Natalie. So just a little bit of background information is that the Freedom Camping Bylaw legislation has changed. We have some old bylaws that need to be reviewed and sorted out, and it makes sense to bring them in line, obviously, with the new legislation. We applied to MB back in February for some funding to conduct this piece of work, and we were successful in getting that funding. So this is not taking resources away from ratepayers. It is absolutely being delivered through funds that we've been able to get in a grant from MB, and therefore we've contacted Emma and Natalie to do this work. They came highly recommended. We went through our procurement process to get to these guys doing this work for us, and they're just going to present where we're at, the project, and what we can expect over the coming months in regard to this piece of work. So I'll hand over.
Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, for that introduction. As Amanda mentioned, I'm Emma. I'm streaming in from Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. We are based up here. And just a small correction, we're GMD, not GHD. That's quite all right. We're a lot smaller unit than GHD, so just a small team up here, 15 people, and we mostly will exclusively work with the public sector in majority of the time with local authorities. The majority of us used to work within various councils around the Motu, so that's kind of our background up here. So are you comfortable, Mayor, if I just speak to the report?
Yes, please.
Front? Wonderful. So as Amanda mentioned, we're at the stage where we are contemplating the development of a new freedom camping bylaw. And that's in response to the changes that have recently been made to the Freedom Camping Act. This is a great bylaw for council to have, and I say that because not all bylaws have the ability or give council the ability to enforce in the way that this Freedom Camping Act does. So there's some really great enforcement tools available to council with this kind of bylaw. It's similar, I guess, to the way that the Dog Control Act interacts with your dog control bylaw. There's some ability to apply fines and such. So great from an enforcement point of view. So we're at the stage of the Freedom Camping bylaw development where we need to bring this decision point to elected members. The Act requires us to, before we proceed with drafting a bylaw for public consultation, that council determines, based on some other reasonably practicable options, whether or not a bylaw is in fact the best option to address the issues of freedom camping that we have in the district. And so that's why you've got the recommendations 1 through to 3 in front of you. It's just to make sure that we have considered other mechanisms to address any problems generated from freedom camping in the district. And it will come as no surprise to you that our recommendation is that a bylaw is the best option to proceed with. Once council's made these determinations, next steps are to develop a draft bylaw and present it to council for consideration for public consultation. So we're very much at the front of this process. the last few months we've been spent having conversations with internal staff. We've talked with the Māori Standing Committee as well as community boards to ensure that we are on the right track with our drafting. We're having a look at a lot of the different sites around the area to consider areas in which we might want to prohibit or restrict freedom camping. Because the default currently, and it has been since the 2011 Act was put into place, is that freedom camping is permitted in all local authority areas. And when we talk about local authority areas, that's areas that council have control or management over. So that can be anything from district roading right through to parks and reserves. The Act does identify that there are other instruments that will manage activities on these public areas, and one such example is the Reserves Act. So the Reserves Act is the polar opposite of the Freedom Camping Act. It says that all freedom camping is prohibited on gazetted reserves unless it's provided for in an individual reserve management plan. So between those two instruments, we are figuring out where we want to apply additional controls, or maybe even identify areas where we might like to encourage freedom camping as part of this process. So I think that's probably the basic introduction. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Thanks very much. Just you've said that have you already reviewed the current freedom camping sites within South Wairarapa, or will that be part of the process going forward?
So there's no current freedom camping bylaw at the moment. I'm aware that there are camping sites, especially along the coast, and that's definitely part of the area that they're looking to. We do have to be careful in some of those sites because they are not all on council land. Aware that there's some sort of areas up the paper road, and so we really have to be, I guess, aware of there's a limit to the scope of what the bylaw can touch, and so we're being cognizant that we're working within those limitations, but also making sure that we've got those areas as part of the conversation, because for a member of the public who wants to go freedom camping or wants to know about the rules, they don't care necessarily which instrument is the rules derived from. So we want to make sure that the conversation is useful for both freedom campers and members of the public.
Councillor Holmes and Councillor Buck.
Thanks very much, and thanks for all the work you've done today. And I was involved in the 2009 Camping and Coastal Areas bylaw, not as a councillor, I might add, but as the coastal ranger at the time. So there are some significant areas along our coastline, and prior to the introduction of the Camping and Coastal bylaw, there was a bit of a free-for-all where people chose to park, how they chose to go to the toilet, and a whole raft of other any social activities that occurred on our coast at the time. I know there is probably no other mechanism in place for enforcing this type of activity on the coast other than a bylaw, in my view. And I think the work should commence around that and get a good understanding of what's obviously ahead of us there on the coastal systems. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for raising the camping and coastal areas bylaw. That has of course lapsed, so it's no longer in force in the district. But that's an example of the history that we're collecting to understand the complete picture and what the freedom camping bylaw made under the Freedom Camping Act can do within that space.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm with you on this, I think, bylaw, but I've got some in a district plan review in our most significant areas that's going to be a real challenge. And South Wairarapa has by far the most now identified, first time ever identified significant area register. And how are you going to cope with that in the bylaw? Because a lot of those things won't be public as well for very good reason. So it's going to be one of those, how will you not allow camping in certain areas, but not say why, as it were. For what is the confusion that can arise?
Exactly. It's sorry, Matt.
Many of those sites are on private land, so we know.
There is some within.
There are.
Thank you, thank you, Martin. Very good point, and we've already engaged with the Māori standing committee. We've already had that initial conversation, and we've already started talking about significant sites. I know Leanne was on earlier, and she's been working with Emma and Natalie to start building some relationships, and Harmy's away.
Yes,
Sorry, apologies. Yes, Emma's been introduced to him. They've already starting to talk about what that might look like. And of note, in the settlement with Ngāti Kahungunu, some sites have been returned to iwi and are no longer either under DOC or council control. So, for example, the lake domain. So some of those places we would traditionally had campaign, we'll look at those alongside our iwi partners and make sure that we're doing the right thing by everyone. The other thing that we got as part of this funding was some money for, we split it into two little pots, one to go out to have some consultants do some work, and then we kept back a little bit of money to be able to do a public awareness campaign and signage. So that once we've got the bylaw in up and running, that will be the next, the step that will follow is we will have some information available, it'll be on our website, we'll work with eyesights and make sure that when people come to the district, they know where they're allowed to go. And it's also an opportunity to potentially raise awareness of some of the significant sites and say, the purpose of this place is, the reason this place is precious, it's a Palma, is because it's a significant site, and that's why we don't have some of that.
One other point on this bylaw, that there's very little point in having a bylaw unless we're going to enforce it.
Yes.
So I presume then that next year in the long-term plan, we're going to be looking some funding for an enforcement officer.
We've been working really closely with Rick's team. So Rick's been part of these conversations as well. And he's came. There's also been a very recent development that I'll just give you a heads up about. And I know it's something that councillors have raised with us before, is doing more collaborative work with other councils. And Masterton have put their hand up very recently and said, would we be willing to join up and have a joint approach to this? And so we've just started some initial conversations with them about joining up, particularly because some of the coastal sites are significant, and it will have a similar approach. Now that may have some consequences on our timeline. I've checked with Rick, he's okay with the timeline, particularly in Shell.
And Carlton?
Carlton have already gone down the road of doing this.
Yeah.
Can I just, one of the things I guess that we haven't captured, or haven't heard that we've captured is Greater Wellington Regional Council land, because the Lower River Hunga, for instance, is a popular camping site. We've also got Wairau Moana in terms of Lake Reserve, which is managed by DOC Regional Council and ourselves. So I'm just wondering how we capture that into a bylaw with some description.
Yeah, that's all the things that we need to figure out.
Okay.
And we're very aware of that. We've got a list back that all the sites we're responsible for and other.
Even though we haven't come to recommendations yet, and we haven't had any debate, etc., I'm almost certainly going to be opposed to the bylaw. Firstly, there's nothing in this paper that gives us the slightest clue as to what the costs of having a bylaw are. And I don't mean the cost of being I mean the cost for the next 10 years or for however long the bylaw is. And if the cost is you somehow we're about to add another person for its team, whatever that means, then I'm definitely opposed to it. We've just had a discussion about some of the highly critical parts of the infrastructure we provide, the water, the roads, etc. And we've all expressed the view that it's either unacceptable to impose the cost or it's a hard pill to swallow. But now we're all of a sudden talking about adding extra staff is something that I'm not convinced we persuasively being convinced about. For example, if our problem is we just want people campaign on some of these areas, Well, the act itself is. So what more are we going to do? And there's no point in having a bylaw unless you are in fact willing, not necessarily to spend on extra staff enforcing it, but potentially you have to be prepared to take people and are we? Well, that's a question. I don't think the advice itself is good. Because there are too many consequences. Anyway, that's my view.
So just to verify, so at this point, you're saying no because you'd like more information?
Exactly.
So you'd rather just hold off on this at this time until we get more information?
Well, I'm happy to receive the report. Useful. I'm not happy that we go ahead straight away and say it's doing fine. I want to know the consequences. Effectively and I need some convincing that this is the only way we keep the areas.
I'd just like to start getting very some really good points. Is it possible then with Masterton just coming on board and coming in and doing some collaboration, should we have to be able to look at that because that may be that there's another way or that there's a way that they're looking at doing it that's without a bylaw, but I'm not 100% sure we can, but
thank you.
Thank you, and some very good points raised. I just wanted to speak to the cost of enforcement because one of the great things with the Freedom Camping Act is that it allows for fines, and there's a structured, a tiered fine approach that's coming in on the 13th of July. And if council did have a bylaw, they would be able to access and generate revenue as a result of those fines. Without a bylaw, the only rule I believe council would be able to enforce is the new requirement that all freedom camping vehicles must be self-contained. And so if a camper was on an area that council manages or controls and it was a vehicle that was not self-contained, they'd be able to, your enforcement officers would be able to apply a fine in that instance. But if anyone was camping anywhere, there wouldn't be any recourse under the Act to apply any additional fines. That's something that you can access through the bylaw. So there's that to consider as well. A lot of, I guess, councils with wide coastlines such as yourself do have this tension between having rules and then enforcing the rules. And a lot of councils do use a risk-based approach to enforcement where they focus on the areas where they know they have problems and then they rely on members of the public to raise requests for service where they do notice that people are breaking the rules or causing problems as a result of their freedom camping activities in other areas. And so it's not as well enforced in other areas, just as a matter of a pragmatic approach to ensuring you've got that really good cost benefit balance. Because people can't be everywhere at once.
I was just going to ask Amanda, whilst we don't currently have a freedom camping bylaw, we obviously have people in the area camping and freedom camping that we are regulating without, we're not
got no regulation.
We've got no regulation at all at the moment.
So previous one last.
Okay, so we've got not currently, we have no ability to tap on a window or attempt to fly and say, you've made a big mess, you've polluted this area. Please clean up.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, there's no camping specific rules that we have.
no.
So the sort of thing I've been quick analysis of many people that do wrong. I mean, I'm
It's not
not.
prosecution, it's fine.
Sorry.
I don't think it's prosecution, I think it's a fine.
Or we, yeah.
Yeah.
Where we find anyway. That's what I'm just doing. But we don't.
Yeah.
Just jump in.
So, excuse me, agree with Matt. Currently, we can't find anyone, so there's no mechanism to find anyone. The new legislation has enabled that, so that's the change. Before we could prosecute, but we wouldn't go through that. I'd say we wouldn't go through that prosecution because the likelihood, absolutely, the likelihood of getting any compensation. Often people are travelling, they're from overseas, they've disappeared by the time we get through to any kind of court proceeding. I don't know off the top of my head if we're prosecuted, but I'd say that's very unlikely. I've had a lengthy conversation with Rick about this. This is something that their team are really looking forward to, is having this mechanism to be able to quickly go to someone and say, you need to move on, you're in the wrong place. If you're still here in 24 hours to come back, we'll fine you. There's things around taking number plates of vehicles that we can then connect to an owner that we can then send a fine to. So it becomes a lot simpler under the freedom camping bylaw than it currently is. At the moment, anyone can camp anywhere they like, and we can do very little about it. Rick's team, if you think about Rick's team, and Russell might want to speak to this, they're already out on the coast talking to people with dogs and other animals. They're already doing that. The summer period for them is a very busy period out on the coast. They would just build it into their work. That would be my estimation. It's a very good point to find out if the income generated would be enough to potentially increase the resources slightly at periods of busyness, maybe. I don't know if Russell.
Yeah, I'll add some further to it in terms of context. So what you're actually navigating, councillors, is that cautious space of seeking outcomes for the environment in anticipation of the tourist numbers, transients through the district, whatever. The area of compliance is a space where you navigate carefully. It's one of working with people at times to give encouraging messaging that Amanda's pointed out, but it's also the point at which you're not getting the listening happening or the cooperation, then pure compliance comes into play. So there's navigating that space. There's also navigating doing as councillors have pointed out, clearly to me for other work, it's a matter of an implementation cost component to new policy or new planning aspects. So the implementation component will need to be borne out carefully, and not just the sole new bylaw, but a mix of what work has already been done and being carried out across the table, and with other stuff coming in. So it's the navigation of that space.
Something that you mentioned when I put my other hat on, I would hate to think that we would make a policy decision on the basis that enforcement will cover the cost of.
Yeah.
To me, agree. The whole point is, I'd like to see a bylaw like this, we never give it a front, because actually, the whole point is actually educating. And
that's allowing people to understand where they can go. And
that's something that is spoken to quite strongly at the community boards, was around awareness, education.
That's right.
I'll give the last word to you at this stage, then we'll come to the recommendation.
I have a question for Emma, and it might help influence your decision, I'm not sure, or get some clarifying points. Emma, do you know if they go through with this determination now and we get to a point, say 6 months down the track, and we make the call that the benefits outweigh, the benefits don't outweigh the costs, and as you say, we go, actually no, this is going to cause us more hassle than it is benefit. Can they choose not to implement a bylaw?
Yes, Amanda. So this, all this recommendation is asking of council is just to have a look at the problem of freedom camping and determine that a bylaw is the best mechanism. And then it's the recommendation 3 is to request that the CE which is, you know, our band of merry people, will go away and develop a draft bylaw. Nothing is going to go out for public consultation without without the council making another decision on that bylaw. And what I might suggest is maybe we add an additional recommendation where council resolves to instruct staff to bring some information on the cost benefit analysis of specifically of the enforcement of a bylaw. We will know more as we develop the provisions of the bylaw, what it might look like, because obviously the way that the bylaw is drafted will impact on the way that it is enforced. But we can have that in mind when we're drafting the bylaw. This information has been really valuable to enable us to understand where council's sitting in terms of where you'd like enforcement to sit. So we can draft something that does reflect that feedback and then provide some evidence to back up what it might cost to enforce. And we can have the benefit of reaching out to other councils that are much further along the process than us to understand what kind of offsetting they experience with the fines, and bring that evidence back to you before making any decisions to go out for public consultation on any bylaw.
Very positive. So you as a comment.
I'd just like to point out this is another demonstration of our mutual work, the opportunities for mutual work across councils in terms of enforcement. So getting to the point where we have a bylaw is one thing, and understanding the most efficient and cost-effective way of implementation or enforcement is another. This is, as I say, an example of where we can have those discussions around the operationalisation of the bylaw with our
I just was consulting all the second ago with recommendation 2. I wonder if it shouldn't be determined if it is necessary. I see.
What's the current?
It might not be determined if it's necessary to make a bylaw.
Paul and I wonder if it shouldn't be reading determines if it is necessary.
which would be more in keeping with what Emma was just saying minutes ago, to do the cost benefit analysis.
Not to mention things or prevent.
So that recommendation is taken directly from the determinations in the Act. So that's why it's worded in that way. It's a sort of it's a statement, it's a decision point. What we can do is I'll speak to Amanda about timings, but if we're wanting to delay that particular recommendation, we can do so and bring it to you in the next meeting, maybe with some more cost benefit data. I would just have to double check the agenda deadlines to make sure I wasn't over promising.
What I would like to do then is to pick up councillors' suggestion of an adjournment just for time. So possibly Emma, if you and Amanda, possibly have a consultation over the next 10 minutes. Maybe I'll get this over. Okay, we're adjourned for 10 minutes.